Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. Eto, pag-usapan natin, State of the Nation Address 2023. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. officially kicks off his second year in office. Oh, ramdam nyo na ba ang first year ng bagong Pilipinas? Of course, one of the things that you noticed today was how the place was packed. So we went from just over 1,000 attendees last year to close to 2,000 attendees this year. Also, kung napansin nyo, medyo refurbished itong Kongreso natin. The Congress today looked particularly glossy, no? And the lighting system, it gave it a kind of a fresh feel and look, which I think is exactly what the whole Bagong Pilipinas rebranding campaign of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is all about. Now, let's pag-usapan natin yung mga key elements of the speech. The speech, of course, was finished not within the 45 minutes that was initially reported, but more or less finished under 1 hour and 15 minutes. This may be long for some people, but let's not forget we had far worse under previous administrations, especially we used to have a president before who did not follow the script, and there's no problem with that unless you know how to properly speak, right? Or stick to your talking points. But I think the speech was very comprehensive, and I think the speech in terms of message discipline, in terms of making sure that you minimize confrontation, you minimize controversy, but at the same time you focus doon sa mga pinakamahalagang issue, and you say things right and left that ticks the boxes, impresses the right people, gives a sense of hope and direction to different members of his coalition, and also to different constituencies, both international, domestic, and across different dimensions of governance and society. Now, before we go dito sa meat of the discussion, let me first say that once again, former President Rodrigo Duterte skipped the State of the Nation address of his successor. I think this speaks volumes. Last year, I don't know anong excuse niya, siguro, tapos na yung term niya, he wanted to go home, he wanted to join his family. Fine, that's it. Although, let's not forget, this was the president that kept on going home to Davao every now and then, including, when, right? But nevertheless, fine. Last year, we gave it to him. But this year, let's not forget that we're talking about the president, to be technically correct, a private citizen, former president, who had all the energy and all the time to go all the way to Beijing and China to meet his special friends there in China and to have a long conversation with no less than paramount leader Xi Jinping. So obviously, kung may gusto, may paraan, diba? So clearly, you had the former president having a lot of time to go all the way abroad, no? Hindi po malapit ang Beijing, may connecting flight pa yata dyan, no? Or baka naman, straight flight, jet setter, diba? So for me, that speaks volumes. That the former president, once again, supposed ally of the current president, let's not forget the unit team was supposed to be composed of a Duterte Marcos axis, right? I think that shows a lot of respect or lack thereof of the former president vis-a-vis his successor. Perhaps it also reflects some degree of disagreement on some key issues. But if there were any disagreements between Marcos Jr. and his followers, his allies, and key sections of his constituencies, yan ang hindi mo makikita sa kanyang speech. Pag napanood mo yung speech ni Marcos Jr., parang ang ganda ng Pilipinas. Parang wala tayong problema. Parang lahat ay maganda, no? Parang everything is bagong Pilipinas, no? I mean, just look at the speech. There was hardly a single controversial issue raised. Well, there was one controversial issue or two raised, Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund. But dun sa mga katulad namin na nakita yung speech in terms of the breakdown, barely 2.5, 3 paragraphs, very short paragraphs, very vague. There was absolutely no mention of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement in any serious sense. Obviously, mahalaga itong issue ng EDCA. Malaki implication nito para sa ating bayan, sa ating national security, para sa West Philippine Sea, para sa ating alyansa sa Amerika. Katulad ng sinasabi natin, President Marcos Jr. has been a bit wishy-washy and ambivalent to put it mildly, about the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, how many American troops will be allowed in the EDCA pre-designated bases, what kind of weapon systems the Americans will be allowed to place there, how large will be some of those bases, since sites lang yung iba na designate dyan sa Cagayan. So there are many things with the EDCA which has been completely unclear to us up until now, and alam natin nine-negotiate pa yan. So dinidribble pa ni Marcos Jr. yan. So we were expecting him to make a pitch for EDCA and to defend EDCA and to defend his expanding security cooperation with the United States, to defend his so-called reintroduction of the Philippines to the West, but we saw none of that. On the West Philippine Sea issue, we did not see the kind of strong, uncompromising language that we heard last year. And pansin nyo, mas marami pa siyang mga mas malaking portion ng kanyang speech was delivered in Filipino or vernacular rather than in English. So ang basa ko dito is the difference from last year is that last year Marcos Jr. was there to impress particularly the international community. To be even more particular, Western allies, Western powers, Europe, Australia, Canada, US, those kinds of places. He was really trying to impress them. We saw that in, tremendous amount of technical jargons or semi-technical jargons he deployed, the very strong stance he took on the West Philippine Sea. So clearly yung audience niya, both in the inauguration speech and dun sa kanyang first State of the Nation address, clearly had the international community in mind because, of course, Marcos Jr. knows their reputation among Western allies, Western friends in other major democracies, mature democracies around the world. This year, yes, katulad ng last year, he started on a very economic note. Ang daming mga details, in-emphasizing economic growth natin, more than 7%. Of course, he was happy to say that it was the fastest growth rate in 4 decades. Don't worry, we will go to the criticism soon. Let's just take it as it is first. Sige na nga, obviously, madali magkaroon ng fastest growth in 40 years kung nagkaroon ka ng slowest growth in 60, 70 years or something during the pandemic, recession, 5 quarters recession, whatever. But anyway, balikan natin itong issue na to later on. So, just like last year, he started with economics. He threw a lot of numbers out there. Clearly wanted to say that economics is something that I know about, something that I'm confident about, and something that I accomplish very well. And then magaling din yung kanyang strategy by saying that may mga areas na wala kaming control, so katulad ng Ukraine war, shock to the oil markets, commodity markets, pero within the realm of macroeconomic intervention and policy making, nagawa namin yung kailangan namin gawin. Within the realm of what we could fix, what we had in control, we did a good job. And that's why he really focused on all macroeconomic indicators that makes him supposedly look like an efficient and competent leader. For instance, discussed din niya how employment numbers are good. Well, not good, not great, but at least not as bad as some critics put it, in fairness to him. Growth rate, already na-mention natin. Inflation, yes, was not good, but in fairness to him, it was not as bad as many, many other emerging markets, Argentina, Turkey, I can go on and on about this. But he was also very happy to emphasize how inflation is coming down to 5% by quarter 3 of this year, and most likely it could settle at around 4% or 4.5% before the end of this year or by the first quarter of next year. So, very proud siya dun sa economics. So, the continuity between now and last year was the economy first, pa-technocratic feels and focus na meron tayo sa speech niya. The difference though is I think this year he had more the domestic audience in mind rather than international audience. That's why kung tinignan mo yung sections niya on EDCA, on foreign policy, even on trade, free trade agreements like RCEP for instance, very thin. Parang ticking the box lang siya, no? So yun yung pansin natin dyan, no? Pagdating sa kanyang speech. I think the speech was disciplined. He did stick to the speech as much as possible. And the speech, so he was both disciplined in delivering the speech, and the speech himself was disciplined in a sense that pag tinignan mo yung speech na yan, again, it avoided all controversial issues. It emphasized the glass half full, but it made it look as if the half full is the full glass, it's the entire glass situation. And then at the same time, makikita natin na he was more than proud to talk about some of the positive developments that happened over the past year. I would say that the greatest achievement that President Marcos Jr. had, for instance, over the past year is yung, well, more or less formalization or recognition of the crisis na meron tayo, namely, yung utang ng ating mga magsasaka. So, more than 58 billion pesos, if I'm not mistaken, of debt, no, incurred by our farmers will be essentially waived because hindi sustainable yung situation. Now, obviously, this in itself is not enough, and in a way, it's just a recognition of the problem that was always there. But for me, it's still, in fairness, consistent dun sa kanyang pangako at sa isa sa mga key elements ng kanyang speech last year doon sa first State of the Nation address, right? Whereby he promised to ameliorate, no, etong kalagayan ng ating mga magsasaka, no, and indirectly or directly for that matter, help or tulungan yung ating sitwasyon pagdating sa agrikultura at food self-sufficiency. Now, speaking of that, obviously, farm to market, other kinds of basic infrastructure, financing, those things are very, very important. And we want to see more details. We want to see more budget allocated in that regard. And we want to see the right people placed in charge of that, not only by the Department of Agrarian Reform, Department of Agriculture, but by all relevant departments, including the DPWH, who will be very, very instrumental to making sure na meron tayong mga sapat na mga proyekto at initiatives para tulungan talaga itong neglected rural development situation sa Pilipinas. I mean, grabbing rural poverty, the average age of a Filipino farmer is 46, 47, 48. I mean, sobrang liit yung domestic production natin compared to what we need. We import close to 90% of our rice from one country alone, Vietnam. That's tremendous amount of vulnerability and reliance on a country that, by the way, happens to be a kind of a semi-rival to us dyan sa West Philippine Sea. So, if you put all of these things together, I think the president was really focused on making sure he cruises through the speech, creates the maximum level of good feels, creates the minimum level of controversy, and gives a piece of the pie to every major constituency. Kaya kanina nung pinapanood natin yung mga response sa mga different senators while andun tayo sa mga television programs breaking this down, for instance, yes, Bato did not get, for instance, his ROTC. But siguro happy siya na hindi na-mention yung ICC, right? So he didn't get ROTC, but there was also no mention of ICC, whereby, it could come off as if, worrying for some of these people. And, so in a sense, there was something out there for people like him. There was no reassurance to the international community that Bongbong Marcos is going to be helpful on human rights front, democracy. So that, in a way, of course, is not a good thing if you care about human rights and democracy. But for people associated with the previous administration, some of them senators of the Republic, that's something that perhaps they appreciated. And then, if you're Rafi Tulfo was very happy that na-mention yung NGCP, yung national grid natin, because katulad ng isang vlog natin earlier this year, isa sa malaking problema natin is our critical infrastructure's vulnerability. Vulnerability to sabotage or all kinds of manipulation. Or just inherent vulnerability. Because if you look at the national grid, yung NGCP natin, 40% owned by a Chinese state-owned company, and some would say 100% run by Chinese engineers, right? With the Filipino counterparts just signing the papers, allegedly. No? So, Rafi Tulfo was very happy that the president mentioned the potential review ng NGCP. That was something that was very good to him. There was also, of course, mention of other important issues sa Fisheries Act natin, important issues, for instance, as I said, dun sa agricultural sector. So he made sure that there's something for everyone to be happy about. No? So that really tells you that Marcos Jr., as much as possible, is sticking to his strategy of quote-unquote unity. Again, pinagtatawanan nito last year because napaka-vague, napaka-motherhood statements, more for, tourism rather than national vision. But in fairness to the guy, from a political calculus Machiavellian standpoint, he has been able to maintain a certain degree of unity or prevent full fractures within his ranks. by avoiding controversial issues altogether, or whenever he has to discuss a controversial issue, he discusses it vaguely enough so that he's not open to criticism, right? So ICC, if diniscuss niyan, he was gonna disappoint one side, either the Duterte side or either the international community or progressive side. He just didn't discuss it at all, right? Is it a good thing? Probably not. But from a political standpoint, he just avoided confrontation. He also did not discuss, for instance, not only not ROTC, but he also did not discuss drug war issue, right? Again, I think that's because he recognized that he cannot please both sides simultaneously. Because the drug war issue is inherently polarizing. Of course, lahat tayo galit sa droga at krimen, pero malaking mga issue natin dun sa paraan ng drug war ng dating administration. Now, of course, he could have talked about drug rehabilitation, etc. in generic terms, in vague terms, but I think he just said, forget about it, let's not talk about it now. There's a better venue to discuss it, because the moment I open up that issue, we're just going to be open to more debates and polarization, etc. I think that was a tactical, situational calculus on the part of the president. There was no issue of the case of Senator De Lima, no case of Rappler, media, relations with ABS-CBN. No, he just skipped all of those issues altogether, right? So that's why if you look at his speech, it's easily 45% economics. And a lot of this is about just general numbers that look impressive on the surface, but if you scratch the surface, as I said, for instance, the 7.6% growth, yeah, it looks great because it's the fastest growth in more than 4 decades. But let's not forget, this is the base effect, because we're recovering from one of the worst recessions in Philippine history during the time of Digong from 2020 to 2021. 5 quarters of recession. In fact, bago magkaroon ng pandemic, may recession na tayo ng first quarter of 2020. Right? So you had 5 quarters of recession, so the country was really downwards. So obviously it's easy for you to grow fast coming back. And there was also an element of revenge spending. Now, what are we to make out of this Sona in general? As I said, the thing kasi with Sona is, huwag kang mag-expect ng maraming details. Because you only have 1 hour, in some cases 1.5 hours, and you want to discuss a whole range of issues important to more than 100 million Filipinos, if not, the whole international community. So talagang unrealistic na mag-expect ka ng super daming details. That's why we look forward to more details coming out from Malacanang, from the Congress, from the legislature, etc. So let's be fair. Nevertheless, there are certain issues, especially controversial issues, which need more clarification. The Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund needed more clarification, more defense if necessary, considering how controversial it is. The EDCA issue needed more clarification, considering how there's so much disinformation by Tatay-style kind of, alam niyo na, people, no? So, but he completely just avoided that. He barely discussed the Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund, almost no discussion of EDCA whatsoever. So there's a downside to that. But then again, this is about his tactical situational calculus, which is, but the thing is this, the Sona is not supposed to be super detailed except on certain issues that need clarification, need justification, need reassurance. But the Sona also tells you something about prioritization. Ano yung priority ng president? So I would say, if you look at the speech, 45% or so is mostly economic, so that means that's really where he's most at home. Has he been very successful in economics so far? It's a mixed bag. Depends on which side of the coin you want to look at. But my sense is, what he didn't say and what he didn't explain says a lot about his political strategy coming to his second year. And again, his political strategy coming to the second year is, I want to avoid controversy, I want to avoid confrontation, I want to avoid alienation of potential allies, key allies already there, and some of the semi-alienated allies already here or outside the country, right? So keeping things on an even keel. Let's just cruise through this. Let's keep things chill. Detox. I think this is really the motto of Marcos Jr. so far heading into second year. So let me end on this note. Katulad ng diniscuss natin the other day, before the Sona, as I said, whatever comes out of this Sona, he said some of the things I was expecting. He did not talk much about other things I hoped him to discuss. But I'm totally unsurprised with how he approached this Sona, because it's very much consistent with his conflict avoidant, non-confrontational unity persona. But my argument is, whether he wants it or not, right? Even if he's not interested in controversy and conflict and controversy in politics is interested in any Filipino president. It's just unavoidable. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of issues that are going to be very divisive and potentially polarizing, if not more, in the coming year or so, if not the coming months. So, the Marlica Sovereign Fund, he didn't explain a lot. But there are going to be more and more questions raised about this, especially as he visits Malaysia soon, and the issue of 1MDB scandal is going to come up. The issue of military pensions, military uniformed personnel pension, is going to be more and more serious and important in the coming months and coming years. Doon sa kanyang speech, again, he's medyo unrealistic yung sinabi niya. Kasi parang sinabi niya is, we can do this without any problem. That's pretty hard. I mean, how can you deal with the pension problem, impending fiscal crisis, as the president himself admitted, in the 5-6 years from now, we're going to have a fiscal crisis if we don't deal with this pension issue. But we know it's a sensitive issue, right? Military pension is a very sensitive issue. I didn't get anything in his Sona in terms of dealing with that. But he's not going to be able to escape it, because if he's going to do something about the pension issue, right, it's going to inevitably have implications. And speaking of Philippine military and relations with the government, that's where the EDCA issue also comes in. Because ang ating sandatang lakas ay sang-ayon dun sa EDCA, sang-ayon dun sa ating relasyon sa Amerika, at generally may reservations sa China. So, keeping that in mind, if you want a good relationship with the military, and then you're going to push for pension reform, and then you don't want any confrontation with the armed forces of the Philippines, but at the same time, there are former presidents, including Duterte, who are not happy with the EDCA, how are you going to square the circle? It's going to be an extremely difficult balancing act, right? Because he cannot go aggressively for pension reform, and then on EDCA not give what the military is looking for, because the military is looking for more and more security cooperation assistance from the US and the West through the EDCA mechanism, right? So you cannot double alienate the military, especially after our history of coups and also the very sensitive reshuffle doon sa military leadership earlier this year. Mahirap yan. But at the same time, kailangan din i-calculate ni Marcos Jr. yung impact naman sa kanyang mga internal alliances, particularly with Duterte, particularly with former President Arroyo, for instance, who are not very happy about the direction of Philippine foreign policy, particularly in terms of our strengthening relations with US, which is inevitably undermining our supposed golden era of relations with China. Ang hirap nun eh. Ang hirap nun. So, paano mo babalansayin yan? Hindi yan madali. And speaking of economics, yes, inflation is going down. It may go down to 4% by first quarter of 2024, but so is economic growth slowing down. So we had 7.6, almost 8% last year, but this year, baka 6% lang growth rate natin. Now, it may look impressive, but the Philippine per capita income is under $4,000 compared to more than $10,000 in China, compared to more than $10,000 in Malaysia, compared to what? More than $70,000 in Singapore. So, at this level of development, which is very, very low, right? Which is very, very low, 6% growth is actually not that much. Especially when your growth is also very low quality. I saw nothing in the Sona or the National Development Plan that really gives me an assurance that we're moving in the right direction in terms of creating inclusive development, meaning bringing in yung mga high-quality investment sa semiconductor industry, sa high-tech sectors, sa manufacturing, core manufacturing, etc. Like for instance, bakit yung mga Toyota natin galing Indonesia? It used to be from Japan, then from Thailand, now from Indonesia. Why not make it in the Philippines? So, I'm not still seeing any reassuring initiatives and commitment on the part of the government in terms of making sure we create high-quality growth, not only high level of growth. Well, so far, both high growth and high-quality growth, they're questionable. I just don't see any assurance on that front. Of course, I hope for the best. I hope the president and his team figure this out, but I'm just not seeing that so far. So, even on the economy front, di ba? O, kamusta naman yung bigas? Yung presyo ng bigas? Akala ko, 20 pesos kada kilo. The latest numbers I was seeing is 42, 43. This is the cheapest you can get out there. Right? So, kamusta naman yung mga populist promises na ganyan? Yung Kadiwa, di ba may mga projects siya. But that's not gonna compensate for market prices, right? Because limitado lang yung pwede provide ng government on subsidized level. Now, if you want to bring the market cost low, you have to deal with structural problems, smuggling problems, production problems, hoarding problems, middleman exploitation problems, right? A lot of market uncertainty problems. No? So, my point is the economy situation is also not going to be as bright as he might wish it to be because wala na yung revenge spending. Nagsuslow down na yung China. At second year na, hindi na honeymoon as much. My sense is sa Pilipinas, mahabang honeymoon, tropical country tayo. But, alam niyo, kaidigong parang 6 years yung honeymoon niya. No matter whatever kapalpakan, go pa rin. But this one, my sense is medyo sisingil lang ang tao, including mga bumoto sa kanya in terms of, saan naman yung golden era? Saan naman yung 20 pesos kada kilo? Saan naman yung mga pinangako sa atin in terms of massive infrastructure projects? They may come 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now. But 2024 is important. Second year of Marcos Jr. is important because it comes before 2025 midterm elections. If he does well in his second year in office, if he keeps his coalition together or even expands it, if he isolates his chief rivals, if he keeps relations with the US on an even keel, if he keeps people satisfied enough over the next year, then he will be in a very strong position to have the 2025 elections completely dominated by his allies and therefore have happy life in his second phase of presidency, which will be the legacy years of 2025, 2026, and 2027. No, so mahalaga talaga this coming year. So there could be a huge difference between a good field Sona that he gave now and the actual difficult balancing act and challenges he's gonna face in the coming 6 months to 12 months. Forget about next 4 or 5 years. No, I think his second year will be his most consequential year. Whoever is the Filipino president, I wish them the best. Having said that, I don't think sugarcoating things or just pretending problems are not there is gonna make things better. In a Sona, the priority of the president was good feel, unity, bagong Pilipinas, fine. If that's what you want, fine. But in terms of his actual governance over the next year, I want him to make the tough decisions we make. Whether on the pension issue with the Armed Forces of the Philippines, whether on the EDCA issue, whether in terms of, yung ICC ba yan? Papayagan ba yung ICC or hindi ba? We have to see something definitive on that. And my sense is the Leila de Lima issue will be resolved either way, positively or negatively, before his third year in office, right? So yun din, that could be a very, very divisive issue. And my sense is it will come out in the second year, right? I could be wrong, but if you look at the timeline, it looks like it's going to come in second year. So what I'm saying here is this. I appreciate the president not being toxic. I appreciate the president not being demagogic. I appreciate the president trying to give good vibes. I appreciate the president trying to keep the speech short and, avoid boring us and saying whatever stuff out there as we had during the previous president, right? But hard choices are coming for his administration this year. So as much as his good vibes in his speech, in his act, in his decision making over the next 6 months to 12 months, he has to act like the president, right? Hindi pwede good vibes lang. At hindi pwede avoid, no? You cannot be like an ostrich, right? You cannot avoid challenges that are already there. I mean, just look at the education issue. He just said some general things about the education situation. The rankings of some of our universities is going well. But yes, we have a massive education crisis in the Philippines. Some said it's like a ticking time bomb. Look at the Philippines' functional literacy, right? Ratings. It's so low. It's one of the worst on earth. It's one of the worst on earth. Look at our proficiency in math and sciences of our basic education sector. It's one of the worst on earth. I mean, talagang bottom, grabe. I mean, diba? So, I know the president wants to say we're moving in the right direction, be proud of your country, good vibes tayo, wag tayo mag-away. I get it. But the president also has an obligation to be realistic with his people and to use his Sona as a clarion call for proper unification around a competent, effective, genuine, and decisive leadership. So, I'm all against authoritarianism. I'm all against Tatay-style populism, all sorts of shenanigans and antics. But I also want a decisive leader. A leader who can make the tough decisions. A leader who can and should be honest and will be honest with his people in terms of real challenges we're facing. And a leader who's willing to go the extra mile, right, to make sure that our future will be better than what we have had over the past half a century, including the legacy of his own father, right? So that's my point. So I'll give him a good score if it's in terms of good vibes, discipline, sticking to the message, right? And in terms of making sure the speech is more unifying, it's more making everyone happy rather than, creating more further polarization or migraine, literally, as we had under the former president. But I hope that's not how he's gonna approach his actual governance over the next 6 months to 1 year. Because as I said, his second year in office might yet be his most consequential yet. Alright? On that note, thank you very much. Again, so we can see, ang dami palang nag-react dito sa space. Ayan. Ayan. Madaming mga galit na naman dyan, ha? Bakit ang daming galit sa inyo? Di ba kayo natutuwa? Unity. Unity daw tayo dyan. Speaking of biyahe, ayan, soon, pag-usapan natin ang next biyahe ni Marcus Jr. Hindi Magellan, Marcus Jr. Malaysia naman. Pag-usapan natin yan soon. Thank you very much again, those joining us over space, dito sa Twitter. Yan, mga kaibigan natin dyan. Marami natin nag-join sa atin. Yan, si DJ Chacha ba yan? Yan. Thank you very much for joining us. Ma'am Lumberia for joining us. And si Derek. Yeah, we have many friends who are joining us. Again, don't worry, I have an article or two, or actually more than two, coming out on this issue soon. I'm gonna post it on my Twitter, so watch out for my detailed analysis of the key policy challenges Marcos is gonna face in what I argue as his most consequential year yet. Thank you very much, and God bless. Thank you also dito sa ating mga followers. Meta, thank you kay Majoy Garcia, Anthony Cruz, Lilia Gargantila, Norgeline Dalmasio, Noemi Tablate, Miri Minalov, Madrigal Heya, sorry, Kanya talaga, Rizani, Evangeline Bacos, Belatis Ini, thank you very much. Kay Ma'am Eden Olona, as always, thank you very much for your kind comments. Really appreciate. Nancy Ong, Anthony Calderon Cruz, ayan, daming comments. Yan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very, very kind of you.